offer you up my friend Karen Sultan. She is a teacher. She's a middle school teacher, so she's faced audiences way tougher than you guys. She teaches in Montgomery County. She's also the mother of 3 boys, the oldest of whom was diagnosed with leukemia. And that is why she's here today, and she is going to talk about what happened with Jamie. And it's a great story, and thank you so much for being willing to share it with us.
Happy to come. Hi. So I don't have anything scripted because I figured I would just kind of talk about, what happened. So...
Is that better?
Okay. So when my oldest son, Jamie, was about a month shy of his 11th birthday, he had a neck ache. And he's not the kind of kid to complain all the time. He just wasn't. And so we went to, that night, we had to pull him out of a soccer game and he couldn't move his head. And so that night, I took him to the hospital because this was unusual, I guess, parental instinct. And they told us, they took some blood and they told us that it was either mono or leukemia. Wonderful choices. Wow. And so we were up at Shady Grove and of Montgomery County. And then they took us by ambulance down to Children's Hospital. We got to choose what hospital, and I said Children's. And they took us to Children's, and we waited for an extremely long time, what seemed like an eternity, for them to come and take a bone marrow aspiration. And that evening they told us, he had ALL, which is acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And the first day he had what was 5% blasts, and blasts are the leukemic cells. So it was 5% blasts in his system. And by the second day he had 40% blasts in his system. So, this is something that's really fast moving. You have to catch it quickly. And so they started chemo. And for the next 3.5 years, that was our daily routine, chemotherapy. So the first year is pretty hard. The first year they kind of bring kids to the brink of death almost, because they give them really, really strong chemo. And there hasn't been any new drug out for kids in I don't know how many years, many, many years. So what they do is they give them adult drugs in these massive doses, and it's really toxic for the kids. And so he was out of school a lot that year. And lucky for me, I worked for MCPS, for Montgomery County Schools, and they were fabulous. They were wonderful and really supportive. And my principal was great. And so I stayed home a lot with him when I could. And my mom came, and my husband stayed home. My mother-in-law came from Israel, so we had all sorts of help. And then the next 2.5 years are what's called long-term maintenance, and that's just like a daily regimen of chemo, enough to keep you down, but not enough to, you could still go to school and do stuff, and every week, 1 day a week, harsh chemo, and then 1 week a month, really awful chemo where he couldn't go to school or do anything. But so he maintained it, and then after 3.5 years, he got off chemo, yay, and he was fine. This was at the beginning of his 8th grade year. And he's been fine ever since, in the sense he hasn't had cancer, but there are a lot of late-term effects that happen with cancer. So that was like our life at school. There are a lot of things that happened during this time when he was going to school and he was going through chemo that are common for kids who have cancer. And one of the things, and one of the reasons that I talk about it, is because I think that although hospitals do a great job with the chemo, they don't necessarily do a great job with certain other things. And I'm very, I go and I do research. My husband goes, he does research. My mom goes and does research. So we're like people, and I'm in the system, I'm in the school system, I know what a kid needs. But a family of immigrants, a family who's poor, a family who doesn't do research because they're so overwhelmed they can't, those are families that need patient advocates. And that would have been really, really helpful, because hospitals should have advocates to work with parents or with families to bring 504 plans, IEPs, whatever the kid needs in a school. And not all school systems are as open as MCPS was. I mean, because my son, that's where they got my kids. I've heard stories of other school systems where, parents haven't been able to get plans to help their kids. So I worked very closely with the school system to get Jamie a plan because I knew what was coming down the pike because I'd read up about some of the after effects of the chemo. Anyway, so he went off treatment, and when he went off treatment, he applied to a math science computer magnet in Montgomery County at Blair High School. He's a senior right now there, applying to colleges very happily, wants to be a pediatric oncologist, and is applying for biology to colleges. Applied to Hopkins and Haverford and Swarthmore, so he's in a really good place with that. But there were a lot of after effects to the chemotherapy. When you are going through this, one of the things that happens in the hospital, one of the treatments that they have to do is they shoot chemo up your spine to break that brain barrier because you can get a CNS relapse, which is your central nervous system. And so to avoid that, they have to kind of like prophylactically do this. And, that has after effects. It had after effects with Jamie and his math ability. He was super strong at math before. Now it's not as hard. Now it's not as, now it's much harder for him. It's not as easy. It gives you ADD-like kind of life afterwards with focus and concentration. And so those are things that we've been dealing with him. Other after effects that you see with cancer, and I would guess it was all cancers, especially with kids, but I would tend to agree that with adults too, is depression and anxiety, and it's natural. And those are other things that if I had to say for a patient advocate in the hospital, that's something that hospitals should look at. Are how are these kids dealing with this? Because there are at least from my experience when he was there, we didn't have that. I arranged baseline testing in terms of neuropsychological testing, but in terms of therapists to come and work with the kids. Even afterwards, now I know that George Washington Hospital has a unit for it, but it's not really, it's for 18 and older. It's not really for kids. There's a whole time period. When he was diagnosed for the first year, maybe 2 years, he refused to talk about the fact that he had cancer. It was he was in total denial. And so these are issues that hospitals, they just want to treat, or at least back then, they wanted to treat the cancer, but there was very little else that came about with it unless, I forced the issue. And that's something that I feel that needs to be done. Because these kids, at 11 years old, you shouldn't be facing your own mortality. And to deal with that. What?
At least not alone.
At least not alone. Not at all. But, and to deal with that, it's really hard. And so last year it was really hard for Jamie. He had to deal with a lot of depression and anxiety. But he did, and he's much better, and he's in a really great place. But it's been a long, long road for him to get there.
Can you talk a little bit about his relationships with his siblings and the impact of his illness on them?
Yeah, sure. So he has two younger brothers. My youngest was in kindergarten when Jamie was diagnosed. My middle son was in third grade when Jamie was diagnosed. Second grade, third grade? Second grade. It was the end of second grade. So it was hard on the whole family. The steroids that they give the kids for a week, a month, it's awful. It's these incredible doses, and it makes the kids crazy. And so it was hard, but everybody just, families can either fall apart or come together during times like this, and we came together. He's really close with his brothers. They were super supportive. They still are super supportive. But it's interesting. They block it. I asked my middle son. We were talking about it yesterday, Noah, about do you remember all of the stuff that happened with Jamie? And he's like, I don't remember it that much. They kind of block it out. It's, I don't know if it's selective memory or what, but they just block out a lot of what they don't remember. But I'll give you another example. My youngest, who is 13 now, so he's in 8th grade, he had a bump on his chest, just like a little rubbery bump. Turned out to be a spider bite that, might have, got infected. But he thought he had cancer. He was hysterical because he thought he had cancer. And I was thinking to myself, no 13-year-old should be, it shouldn't be the first thought of a 13-year-old. So this kind of stuff manifests itself in different ways, I guess, with that you don't even realize. One year, when Jamie was in the hospital over winter break, Kobe, that's my youngest, he wrote down, he drew a picture and he said, the only thing I want is for my brother to come home from the hospital and play with me. So they were really close. We went on trips, we went to Spain together. We went, when Jamie finished his treatment, we went to Costa Rica to celebrate just the 5 of us. So one of the things that my husband and I have been very, very careful with is, this is a family, it affects all of us, we're all in this together. So, what else? So right now, Jamie is, and I had pictures of him before, but I guess, I don't know where, I had shared them with Jenny on a Google Docs. But he's working, for the past 2 years, he worked at NIH over the summer, doing research on cancer. And then this year they asked him to stay on during the school year. So for half a day he goes to school, and the other half a day he goes to NIH to study cancer. And it's been really amazing for him. He really loves this. And it's only added to his idea of wanting to be a pediatric oncologist.
I'll take a minute to...
Oh, okay. So I don't know, what questions would you guys have?
How are things like for him socially? Like, spending a lot of time in the hospital, I'm sure he's missing out a lot of things with his friends.
Yeah.
Peers, so how is that going for him socially?
That's a great question. So while he was going through treatment, he had like a few really close friends that he would see a lot, but that was him during treatment. The dates are all wrong because my camera was messed up, but that's him during treatment. But it was really hard for him, and part of the idea that he wanted to be in, part of the reason that he wanted to switch to the magnet program that he applied was because he needed a start where nobody knew that he had had cancer. He didn't want anybody to know, because you don't want to be different, And so there was this kid in the school who had cancer also, and was a year ahead of Jamie. His name was Kobe also. I teach his sister this year. And he was very proud of he was happy that he had gone, not just gone through it, but had won. He had a bone marrow transplant. I mean, it was really hard on him. And one day he went in the hallway to Jamie and he's like, look, here's my scar. Where's your scar? From the Broviac, which, the port that they put in there. And Jamie was like, and he did not want to talk about it or anything because he didn't want anybody to know. But it didn't matter. Everybody still knew.
How much counseling have you gotten in terms of the long-term health risks that he has because of the cancer treatment?
So children, when you first get out, on long-term out of long-term maintenance. You have 2 months. Every 2 months you go see the doctor. Then every 4 months. Then every 6 months. So he's at that 6-month phase. And when we go, they talk to us a lot about it. Of course, the depression and the anxiety are not things that are just going to go away. So he has to keep up with that. He's at risk for heart issues. He's at risk for certain skin cancer. He's at higher risk for other cancers because of his treatment. And I guess that's just the nature of the game when you're taking chemo, that you're at risk for other treatment, for other cancers. They're not sure. The long-term effects haven't been studied as much as, the kind of, let's see how many kids we can save, which I understand. But he's definitely at higher risk for certain things. And what's interesting is that kids who have had cancer have this kind of riskier behavior where they say, well, I've beaten cancer, so now, I'll go skydive, or I'll, he's very into boxing right now, which I don't really understand because who wants to get hit, but he really is. And, his doctor said, yeah, it's all normal. It's all normal. But he's had a lot. I mean, I have to say Children's has done a pretty good job of it, telling us what's up the pike.
What about, do they have counseling for the families? Because it's such a big experience for you, too.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, as a parent, how you make sure that you still provide quote-unquote normal life for the youngest one, and not for them to feel neglected when all the focus is on the kid who has the cancer. Because I heard stories from other acquaintance families that everything is concentrated on this particular child because that's the person who's going through it, and then the other kids feel left out for the parents,
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So ironically enough, about, I don't know, I guess about 8 months before Jamie was diagnosed, I watched this, my mom and I watched this PBS special on Frontline called Line in the House. And it was where these two cinematographers had followed, I think, five kids with pediatric leukemia for 6 years. And one of the girls in there had died. And her sister said on this, in this documentary, she said, when my sister was alive, it was all about her, and then she died, and it was all about me. And that really stuck with me. And so, yeah, I mean, it's
gives you chills.
Yeah, and so when Jamie was diagnosed, we made a very concerted effort that his routine would stay normal, so as normal as we could, and the other, like, everybody would be in it together, and we would all know that this isn't just it's not, I mean, he's the one going through it, but we're all going through it, and so we were really, really careful that it was all about all of us, that it wasn't just about him, and we just stressed it over and over.
How did you prepare for that, though? Did you have someone who you knew that you talked to, or how does one even get ready?
Yeah, you can't really prepare because you don't know what's going to happen. But, I mean, it was more like, I guess, part of me as an educator also, that what's best is to keep the kids in a routine and as normal as possible. I mean, and, you can only do it to a certain extent. Every day, anytime he would come out with a fever, he'd have to go in the hospital for a few days so that your routine would go out the window. Anytime, anything happened, your routine would go out the window. But those are my boys. But you just, you keep trying and you keep setting those expectations. When you're home, this is the way it's going to be, Even if, you're really tired from chemo, we're going to try and take that walk every day so that you have a little bit of activity. You're not going to, just because I know that you're on steroids, but you're going to need to act okay with your brothers because they're people too and it's not their fault, stuff like that. And it's just the expectation, It's hard though. It really is because you feel really sorry. One of the big things that some parents do, and I've seen it from other parents, is that everything goes to the one who's got cancer, and they're allowed to do anything and run wild and whatever they want because they're going through this terrible thing. But I think that's more scary to the kid because I think then that the kid thinks, hey, I'm going to die. That's why they're letting me do all this stuff. My husband shaved his head.
Looks good.
That we really leaned on each other. We got a lot closer, and we, for the first few months, you're just kind of numb. Nothing really changes because you're just kind of stepping one foot in front of the other, trying to deal with life. But as it goes along, we talked all the time, and we just got a lot closer. We're just a really close family now. I mean, we were close before, but now this really. Everything we did in step together, and we talked about it, and we made sure that we were okay and that we were in step together. Because it was hard. Every month before Jamie would go on steroids, it would be like this really tense time in the house. We'd know that it was going to be bad because he'd feel so awful, and the steroids would make him so crazy. But, we just we knew that week we would just need to lay low. It was hard, but we talked a lot. It would have been nice, though. I think that had the hospital offered some sort of therapy for the family, that would have been a really good thing. Because they didn't. No,
That's a great picture.
it is a good picture.
Karen, I remember you talking at one point about, I think what you said was, when your kid has cancer, you figure out who your friends are.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So it's real interesting because, you've got these really close friends and you think that everything is, you're going to be able to rely on them. And then your kid gets sick and you never hear from them. Or you have people who you were friends with, but it wasn't like, wow. And then they really step up to the plate. And there were people who I was friends with, but who I hadn't been so close with before. I'd been friendly with, and they stepped up to the plate and they were amazing. And then there were people who I thought would be, right there calling or finding out, and they didn't do anything. So you really do find out who your friends are when you go through something like this. It's kind of sad. My even, who your family is. Like my parents, my mom and my stepfather, every step of the way. When Jamie was on treatment, on his heavy treatment, my mom was down there with us. She lives in New Jersey. She would drive down. Anytime that Jamie went to the hospital, my mom was there. And my husband's family, they live in Israel. They couldn't really come, but my mother-in-law came to help, when she could. But we had people who, like my dad he couldn't deal with it. He just couldn't, and all of a sudden he stopped calling. He lived in Florida at the time, but he just couldn't deal with a grandkid with cancer. And so, you just kind of find out who's strong and who's not,
As somebody who needed that support, do you look at your dad or another friend that maybe disappointed you, and do you bear any sort of ill will toward them, or do you understand like everybody has a different reaction to this, or do you really feel toward them like, you let me down, I don't trust you now?
So for my dad, I understand. Like he's passed away now, but I didn't really talk to him because it was when he passed away. Jamie was still going through all this, but like I understood. Like I'm not mad about it because he just didn't have that capacity. Friends are a little different. I had some friends who just kind of disappeared, and I ran into her a couple of times, and I was just like, yeah, no, I don't want to be friends anymore. I don't want to talk to you because, that's just not the nature of what friendship is, so.
I wonder if you encountered any trouble with the cost of treatment and care.
It's expensive. It's really expensive.
Did insurance help out cover 100%, or did you have to, was there a donut hole there somewhere?
No, I'm really lucky. Montgomery County Schools, I'm a teacher and I have a really great health care. And I did not have any problems ever. Even when I went for Jamie's neuropsych, which they don't usually cover like neuropsych evaluations, but I called and I explained, I said, this is physiological. It's not, psychological because of, this is something that came from we have to do a baseline. We have to see what happens afterwards. And they covered everything. The insurance was great. I never once had a problem with them. And Montgomery County was great. if I had a question, the insurance people were right there and helped me out. So I can't complain about that.
I was going to ask you, if you had to cut through insurance issues to make sure that treatment would cover or treatment was approved, but obviously it seems like it was a smooth ride.
It was really, and that's great because I can't imagine dealing with all the issues that you're dealing with cancer and then having to deal with it. But I know families, there's a listserv that I'm on for parents of kids with leukemia, and there are a lot of families out there where the insurance company gives them so many, is so hard on them. And so you have to deal with the sick kid. Some of them you have to deal with like a family that's broken apart and the husband and wife are totally separate now. And then dealing with insurance. That's a lot for somebody to deal with.
What kinds of discussions did you have with him about his cancer? Like when he first got it and even ongoing? What sort of things did you talk to him about?
So we talked, first he was in denial, so you couldn't really talk to him that much about it. But once...
Is that normal to you?
Yeah, the neuropsychologist told me that his brain just couldn't handle it, which I understand. But I told him that I thought that he got sick for a reason. I said, first of all, I think that to get to be the person that you're going to be, you need to go through all of this, and everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people go through some sort of tragedy, and it just makes you stronger. And I really, really, really believe that. I think that Jamie is destined to do really good things in his life, and I think that to be able to do that, he had to go through this because he has so much empathy, and he understands. He gets it, and he's super smart, super science guy, and so he understands the science behind it also. And I think all of this will lead him to something. My little bald boy.
What was you talked a little bit about steroids and chemotherapy. Can you kind of break that down? When, what was given, and how much, and is there anything in the pipeline for ALL patients, that you see in the clinic today?
So, okay, so like the first year, they give you these, like the first month or the first couple of weeks even, they give you this concoction of 4 really, really strong chemos. Like daunorubicin and some other stuff that's really hard on you. And so they gave him that, and then he went through like they go through all these different phases, and they give them during one point it's called high dose methotrexate, which they put you in the hospital for, and they put it in your body, and then right away they give you what's called a leucovorin rescue because they want to get it out of your system as quickly as possible because it's so toxic. And so these, like all these really harsh chemotherapies, those are like the first year. Then the maintenance comes along, and they put you also on, at first they had him on, they eventually had him only on prednisone because they had him on dexamethasone at first, and dexamethasone, it turned out, was causing AVN, avascular necrosis, in a lot of kids where their bones die. It starts in the hip. So Jamie was part of a study, and so he was on the arm of the study that had high dose methotrexate and dexamethasone. So all of a sudden they took all the kids who were on dexamethasone off of dexamethasone and put them on prednisone. And he was on 50 milligrams twice a day, which, I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's a lot. And he would take that for 5 days a month, 5 consecutive days a month. That was the hard time. He took also vincristine once a month. He would take oral methotrexate every week, like 13 little pills. And he would take, I forgot what the name of the last one was. Wow. That's good. I'm glad I forgot. MP6, never mind. 6MP. He would take 6MP every day. Plus he was in the hospital and he couldn't take it. But the steroids are really bad, but they act like a chemo agent. So boys at that time were taking it for 3.5 years and girls for 2.5 because they found that that's what was most effective. Now I believe boys are taking it for 2.5 years. Also, when he just finished the treatment, they found that so many kids were doing well with this high-dose methotrexate that they changed the protocol for everybody. So, like, I had a student at Westland who had leukemia, and he had just finished all of the, like, heavy stuff, and he had started long-term maintenance, and they made him go back and do that because it was so much more effective, they said. So I think that they've really done a great job in terms of treating the disease. I really do. I think that they have worked hard, part of the studies. Cure Search is amazing. That's pediatric oncology group. It's all over the world where they do studies like what Jamie was in. They're really great and they brought up they brought down, I guess, the mortality rate in pediatric cancers. But now what we really need to focus on are those after effects.
For the study that you say that your son was part of.
Oh, that's us now. This was at my son's bar mitzvah in September. That's Jamie all the way over here.
For the study that you guys were part of, did they approach you and to see if you want your son to be part of the study? Did they have to do a lot of convincing, or you just knew that whatever it takes to save my kid's life, pretty much?
So he was diagnosed on May 8th, and so we had a meeting with the doctors on May 9th to talk about it. And they only give you like the first section of treatment because you really can't handle anything more. So they run you through like, this is what what's gonna happen the next couple of weeks. And that's when they asked if he would be part of the study because that's going to determine what his treatment's going to be. So the study is always what the protocol is and then more, right? So it's the basic that you're going to get is that protocol. And he was high risk because he was 10 when he was diagnosed. If he had been 9 when he was diagnosed, he wouldn't be high risk. He would have been regular risk. But he had to go through extra treatment.
Just 1 year age difference put him in a higher.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
Because kids between the ages of like 10 and 15, I think it is, they have a higher mortality rate.
Oh.
The older you get with leukemia, except for like the infant leukemia, which is very, that one has a high mortality rate. But the older you get with leukemia, I think it's worse, the worse you are. So he was in a high risk, and so there they said, okay, so this is the baseline, this is like the protocol, and then here's the extra. This is what would happen if you were in the study. And so, yeah, we didn't actually even think twice about it. It was always like, yeah.
Did you discuss that with him, if he wanted to have that extra stuff done with him? Or
No, he was 10. We didn't give him an option, you know. We just said this is what's going to happen. Because, and he's one, you know, I mean, he's all about science. So he was part of, you know, when, and he was approached by Children's to do another study on the neuropsychological effects. And he was the first one to say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So, I mean, I never thought that he'd have any doubt. But I also think it's really important for other kids who are going to have the treatment that we do this study. I mean, it's the only way. The reason that we got to where we were with Jamie and that there was a 75% chance was because other kids had done studies. So, you know, we absolutely should.
Does he have any interest in meeting one-on-one with juvenile leukemia patients now to kind of share his experience with them?
Yeah, I mean, he would. We have talked to I've talked to other parents of kids who've been diagnosed, but it had been like when the kids were just diagnosed and the kids were not ready to see it. But yeah, he would do that. He would definitely do that.
I'm going to take my journalist hat off. So this group knows I'm a testicular cancer survivor, 30 years now.
Wow,
Since
congratulations.
I was diagnosed. And I was a patient at Sloan Kettering, and one of the really beneficial programs for me was something called Patient to Patient, where they matched current cancer patients with those who had been through treatment and were out for 2 years. And it was very, very helpful for me sort of on a human level. We stayed connected for a long time, and then I went back to San Francisco, and they didn't have a program like that at UCSF, and so I helped to start one there. And now they've kind of populated around the country. So where you see deficits, you might want to try to create something to fill the needs that you so accurately perceived.
Yeah, I've talked with Children's about the patient advocate. That was really one of my big passions because I felt that, you know, here I am and I have the knowledge to be able to get Jamie what he needed, especially because I was a teacher, I was a staff developer, I worked in the school system. I knew what he would need on a scholastic level, right? But, you know, and also I didn't realize what was going to happen in terms of the depression and stuff until we were kind of sitting in the middle of it. And so we just kind of came up for air this year, you know, with it. So, I mean, definitely something that I'm planning on talking to the hospital. But you just kind of like, I mean, sometimes you're just walking one foot in front of the other. But yeah, for sure. That year that Jamie was diagnosed, my brother-in-law was diagnosed with testicular cancer at 21. Or 31, sorry, 31, but still super young. And then my stepfather with prostate cancer. So it was just like, yeah, it was a hard year. It was the worst year I can remember.
It just happens that way.
It does. Everything falls, but everybody's fine. Go figure. So I can't complain, right? I mean, there are a lot of people who aren't. I mean, I've seen a lot of the treatments have, you know, the treatment is as bad as the cancer sometimes. I mean, I imagine for testicular cancer. Well, Rich went through Gleevec, so he had, I think, 6 treatments of Gleevec.
I had 4, but they've also learned how to generally make them less toxic over time.
Yeah.
Which you indicated too.
Yeah. They do a lot more research on adults than they do on kids. You know, I mean, pediatric cancers are so rare. Only, I think, like 2,500 kids a year get cancer. So there's not a lot of money to be made from pediatric cancer drugs.
We're going to hear more about that tomorrow, actually.
Oh,
We
really?
have someone who's coming to talk about, she's the head of Kids versus Cancer, and they deal with they try to raise money for research on pediatric cancers.
We've lobbied Congress. Jamie and I have lobbied Congress for money for cancer, for NIH or for pediatric cancer. I don't think it has had any effect, but we've definitely lobbied for it. It's hard, and it's hard for families. And I think that I really do think that although I feel that the hospital does such a great job with the cancer itself, I feel that hospitals need to look more at the whole issue rather than, just the one issue, just the physical.
How does he manage his mental health?
So he is, he had a really hard time last year, and he said to us, I have depression. I think that he was worried that, maybe, I don't think he was ever really suicidal, or maybe if he was, at a very low point, but he was like, I need to see somebody and I need to just get over this. And it was, he tried different medicines, and then this summer he went off his medicine because he said, I feel like I'm doing okay. And he's been doing okay now. He's been, great. This year has been an unbelievable year for him. And I think the depression stems from, when I didn't really, it didn't hit me until Jamie went into long-term maintenance a year after he had been diagnosed. So it's possible that it didn't hit him until, he was off treatment for a couple of years. And junior year is a really hard year for kids. I mean, I don't think that when I went through high school, I had anything like what they have now, so it's really hard. So I think that that's part of it too,
Do you have any concerns long-term, if this isn't too personal a question, about fertility for him?
No, I asked about that. That was something that I was worried about. But the doctor said that his particular treatment, he would be okay. But, I do worry about that. And I worry also because even though the doctors tell me that leukemia is not, that it's not genetic, that it's not hereditary, my husband's side of the family has had 2 people with leukemia beside, and then we have Jamie. And so it's, they were different kinds of leukemia, but still, I'm just, what are the odds?
Yeah.
We learned about that yesterday.
They probably said very little, but they said also, to me, that there was no way that the leukemia, that the neck ache had anything to do with leukemia. Jamie went to the hospital because of the neck ache. They said it had nothing to do with leukemia, but the neck ache went away after he had chemo, and it was the only sign. So, to me, there must have been something there.
Thank God.
Yeah. One never
Otherwise,
knows.
you guys would not have gone and
No, and I was driving to one hospital, and I said, I think that this other hospital might have a better pediatric department, and I turned around midway, and I went up to Shady Grove. And lo and behold, they were the ones who diagnosed him. I don't know if the first hospital would have.
Do you think that access to being in a nearby hospital that treat cancer in pediatrics and teens help you compared to other children who are in rural areas that had to travel 2 hours
Oh, yeah.
or 3 hours to Denver, for example, to get treatment for cancer, and
Yeah.
you had to live there for a week because you cannot go back and forth.
That's actually a huge issue because, the fact of the matter is that we had several hospitals in the area we could have gone to, right? We didn't have to go to Children's. We could have gone to Hopkins also. It was the same distance away. And so I'm lucky. But there are a lot of families out there that the parents have to kind of split. One of them goes with the cancer kid. The other one stays with the other kids, because the hospitals that are going to treat kids are far. They're 2, 3, 4 hours away. And when you're a kid with cancer, you have to be near the hospital. Every time you get a fever, you're in the hospital because they have to make sure you're going to be okay. Everything is dangerous for you. Everything. So, that's a really big concern.
Yeah, I have friends, his friends, but they live in Durango, Colorado, so they had to drive 6 hours to Denver, and they pretty much had to move there for 6 months because they just couldn't be back and forth.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and imagine if it's a treatment, I think that leukemia has the longest treatment because 3.5 years is a long time for treatment. It's it grinds you down, that 3.5 years. And imagine, if it's a 3.5 year treatment, you're going to have to move there, find new jobs, or do something if you want to keep your family together. Yeah, it's really hard. And who's going to want to hire somebody who they're going to have to put their kid on their insurance who has leukemia? There are a lot of issues out there that are surrounding, these peripheral issues that mean a lot.
how was work with you in terms of time off?
So I was working half-time. I was working part-time at the time. And I was a staff developer, so I had a very flexible schedule, and I worked with a partner, and so she was very flexible with her schedule, so she and I would tell her when I needed to be, and when I needed to be home and when I needed to be at school, and when I could be at school. My principal was just so understanding. He said, do what you need to do. And I did, so I was really lucky that I had that flexibility. If I had been a teacher in the classroom, I couldn't have had that flexibility at that time. I mean, now I'm back in the classroom because I miss the kids, believe it or not. But, yeah, they were great. I have to say, they were really wonderful with me. And it's all dependent. If you're a teacher, it's all dependent on your principal. You know, if your principal knows that you're good, then I'm sure they'll work with you. But not all principals do. Mine now is fabulous too.
You had mentioned that your husband's side of the family has 2 cases of leukemia as well. Did that play a role? Did your husband ever blame himself or anything, or
No.
was that just the researcher said it wasn't hereditary? So
Yeah, no, I mean, we just always felt that there must be some kind of familial connection, but we never, no. I mean, there are things that you can't help in life. I mean, there's no use blaming yourself for something that, you just can't help. I would have loved to have been a strawberry blonde, but not in my genes. I mean, it is what it is. But, he had his father's brother, I think it was, died at 20-something or very young of leukemia. And then there had another family member also. But no.
Do you younger kids worry that they may get leukemia too, or something that you guys had to talk to them that odds are not there, or are they worried?
Yeah, I mean, my youngest, I think he really worries. Every time he finds a little bump on him, but this time, when he had that little bump on his chest, he was really worried. He thought that he had cancer. And I don't think my middle one is as worried. My middle one's really laid back. But my youngest, I mean, I really think that he worries about this a lot. He's a worrier.
So the middle one's the really tall one?
Yeah, go figure, right? Go figure. Well, Jamie was on growth hormones, and my middle one also was on growth hormones. My youngest wasn't. But so Jamie was on growth hormones, and then when he went on treatment, when they found out he had leukemia, they took him off growth hormones, obviously. And then after treatment, they did not want to put him back on because, although growth hormones have zero to do with it, they just said since he had been on it before, we don't want to take the chance. Understandable. So that's why my really, really tall one, who's not really, really tall, to be honest with you, he's 5'8", but he likes to think that he's really tall because he's the tallest one in the house. But he's the one who's laid back.
Is that pretty common to use growth hormone for, what is it?
Well, they have growth deficiency. My kids had growth deficiency, so it was. I mean, we went to see a specialist, an endocrinologist, and so they had growth hormone deficiency. But my youngest one doesn't have it. He just doesn't follow any of the patterns. But I know that there's a family in Virginia who has 2 sons who had leukemia, and both of them are fine today. But she went through it with one son, and then he got better, and then another son got it. And there's less than a 1% chance that you'd do that. I mean, that I have to say. But and then the first son, after the second son, it relapsed. It was just awful for her. But everybody finally was okay. But that was really awful for her. So I count myself lucky.
Beautiful family.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
She's reaching for the mug. She gonna throw it at me or something?
You get your choice. We have the National Press Foundation mug and the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios mug, which is for our new studio that just opened there. So end of the day, pick one.
I'm going to go with this one, just
Okay.
because it looks a little bigger and I like a
Very good.
large cup
Actually-
of coffee in the morning.
And you can take this and give it to Jamie.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your sharing your story. It's fascinating as always, and I also like to end the day on a high note. So this is a great picture, and we're really glad that Jamie's doing well.
Thanks. And one day you're going to hear that Jamie Sultan has cured cancer or something. I am 100% sure of it
We're
because
setting up our Google alerts right
there
now.
you go.
And we were like, can we talk to his mom?
There you go. He was going to come with me today, but he was at NIH.
Very cool.
He was working. Thank you. Thank you.